intro. Greetings, dear horrific folks. You are watching.
Horror, just to interrupt, we know horror sounds a lot like horror. Emily is not calling you horrific or horry types of people,
Oh my
just to
gosh.
be abundantly queer.
Thank you, Pace. Uh, Greetings, horror fans. Growing up, I could not pronounce my R's for a while, so horror is like one of the worst words ever.
It's
Anyway.
true.
You are watching or listening to Horror Nerds at Church, a ridiculously queer podcast where we take a deep dive into a horror film and talk about how it connects to queerness, religion, and theology. I'm Pastor Emily, and I am the axe ready for milking.
Ah, lovely image there that the film provided us with. And I'm Pace, and I am the weird obsessions with anuses that witches apparently have, at least according to this film. Love it. Um, just so all of you know, you can get some really awesome bonus content if you like what you're listening to or watching by going to patreon.com/horror nerds at church. It starts at only $5 to sign up. But dropping this month, all Patreon subscribers get a boo tube on Charmed, the original series. We'll have to cover the revived series some other time. And then there's also a movie commentary on The Wiz. And then our horror buffs get an episode on Friday the 13th. And I'm wearing my Friday the 13th shirt because we're recording this just a few days after that auspicious day. And
Mm-mm.
then if you're listening to us, check out our show notes for content warnings for this episode, plus all the good tea. Oh, speaking of tea, that's one other perk that we are discovering this season you get on Patreon.
I was
All
gonna
the
say,
tea.
yeah, you get a lot more tea about our lives on Patreon if you're a Patreon supporter. Um, than just on our regular feed, just so you know. Anyway, also, if you are listening to this episode on your favorite podcast provider, check the show notes for any content warnings for this episode. Links to all the books we mention are on our bookshop.org store. And for everyone watching or listening, check out the show notes for links to our newsletter, merch store, and Patreon, or the comments for our link tree, which has all of that information on it. So,
Yep.
announcements or check in first?
Up to you.
What are you drinking,
You're
Pace?
about to transition. Okay.
Oh God. I'm drinking the best ever witch's brew, which is unbelievably awesome if you see this awesome HNAC sticker and this HNAC sticker and this HNAC sticker, all of which are staying on way better than this non-HNAC sticker, which is basically just a white rectangle, just so you know. My witch's brew is called dihydrogen monoxide, as our friend of the podcast, River, likes to call it.
I love it.
It's water.
I love it. And I like how you were transitioning and I ruined it by mentioning transition.
Mhm, mhm.
That's how we roll on
How
this
we roll.
podcast.
Yeah.
I am drinking LaCroix peach pear,
Ooh,
which all the
double
memes and
spicy.
jokes about LaCroix. So this is like peach pear a whisper of peach pear from a mile away or whatever the memes are. And then also I am drinking Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola does not sponsor us. They're an evil company. However, I have been sick all weekend, which is part of how I'm doing, which is not great recently, but doing better tonight. And Coca-Cola helps settle the stomach.
Mm. Good call. Good call. Um,
I am drinking coffee as per usual out of my dog mom cup because there's never a time when it's not a great idea to drink coffee.
and which coffee
True
is
story.
that?
It's
Is
my
it perhaps
birthday coffee from yesterday when we put it in the fridge to save it for today. So my birthday week is I am taking I'm doing a week because if the Leos can have a month, then the Virgos can have a week. God damn it. Um, Lord, like it's not that Virgos don't care about our birthday. We're just worn out from all the Leoing. Like, whoa. So
wow.
anyway, I'm taking a week and it's going to be my pocket universe week where I spend more time doing the things that make my life good but are never quite considered urgent. You know, like the four
Yeah.
quadrants of the Eisenhower matrix where you have like important and
Mhm.
urgent and then like things that aren't urgent but are important. So I'm taking my this week to be like my own little pocket universe where the rest of the world goes by, and in my universe I'm just going to do the things that are important but aren't really considered urgent that I want to do. So that's what
Yeah.
I'm doing. And part of that is drinking coffee, and Brooke made me a super special one that's made of white chocolate, and it was a 6-shot white chocolate with brown sugar
Cinnamon dolce.
syrup. Yeah, and it was
That sounds
amazing.
delicious.
Mm-mm.
Amaze. So that's where I
That sounds delicious.
am. What are you
I
drinking?
love that. I think I also have a fall birthday, and so does Emily, all three of us on this podcast. I
Mhm.
mean, yours is right before fall, but it's still fall season, so I count it.
Yeah.
Suzannah. So all of us, three of us have fall birthdays, and I think the gift of time is one of the best gifts we can give ourselves and our loved ones around birthdays. So I love that
Mm-mm.
idea of yours, giving yourself the gift of time to do what's important to you that you've not had time to do.
Yeah. Indeed.
Um, Because I've been sick, I guess I can go next. What I've been up to is watching a lot of movies, and because it's spooky season, I've
Mm.
been watching a lot of spooky movies. So I've talked a little bit before. Oh, speaking of, this just arrived in the mail today, my latest edition of Fangoria, but this is a special collector's edition of the magazine all about the film Substance. Love Fangoria, uh, #1 horror magazine, basically horror film magazine. Uh, but they created a poster of fan voted horror subscribers to the Fangoria magazine, of which I am one. A poster of the 100 best horror movies that were voted
Yeah.
on by us. And so on those, I've watched a whole bunch of them. I watched Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and Shaun of the Dead all yesterday, which was my sick day because I felt like I was the living dead. And so I was like, this is a good time to watch zombie movies.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and those are all the originals there. I do plan to watch the remakes of each of those three at some other point. But that was fun to have a little zombie marathon. And then this morning, a first time watch for me was Dead Alive, which I've never seen before. It was directed by Peter Jackson, who you know, of course, from Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and stuff. He got his
Mm-hmm.
start doing horror films, as many amazing actors and directors have. And this is an early horror film of his, and it is so campy, like intentionally campy and funny and like over the top gore that's done in a really comedic, like camp style of gore. It's just was
Mm-hmm.
such a fun movie. So that's how I started this morning. Um, and then in my Doctor Who marathon, Emily and I are trying to watch an episode of Doctor Who a day on average, but it tends not to be quite as much as a day. But the most recent one I watched was the final episode of the Fifth Doctor. So sad to see him go, but excited for the Sixth Doctor. And then I've been reading. the second book of Claudia Gray's Firebird trilogy, which is really good. And Claudia Gray is a past podcast guest we've had on. She was a great guest. And then the last update is, I said this on Patreon already, but here on main feed as well. If you go to AAR, if you are a nerd theology, religion, Bible type of person who goes to the American Academy of Religion or Society of Biblical Literature's annual meeting, I'd love to see y'all there. I'm going as well, so hit me up. You can email us at the podcast horrornerds at church@gmail.com that you're going, and I'd love to meet some of you all. What about you, Emily? What have you been up to? I've been reading, watching, all that good stuff.
I have been watching Doctor Who as per usual. I am currently about to watch The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe, the Christmas special. So I'm finally in my Sarah Jane era for the third Doctor. Super excited. I love Sarah Jane Smith. She's delightful. And I'm actually probably after this going to marathon some Doctor Who while I fold laundry that has been sitting in a clean basket for over a month now. Because that is my life. I also have been doing some wonderful doodle prayers. These are from this morning, actually, because I do them Tuesday mornings at 10:30 a.m. Eastern and Thursday afternoon and evenings at 5 p.m. Eastern on Zoom for whoever wants them. So I've been doing that. And the big exciting is I am working on a book.
Yay!
Very exciting and very scary, and I'm trying to actually tell people about it because why not? So it's basically communion according to kids. So it is a kids picture book that looks at the different way different denominations do communion, but through the eyes of a child, in the transition space into the pandemic. So when everything went virtual and kind of how that changed it. And I'm super excited because I get to both write and illustrate it. And the illustrations are kind of inspired by Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and kind of inspired by my TikTok series Roll for Art. So each different like denominational way of doing communion is going to have a different art style for it, for the book. So I'm super excited about it and kind of terrified.
That is exciting.
Yeah. And like updating my Patreon so that like people can follow it and get information and all of those things. And yeah, so it's exciting and a little bit terrifying and very exciting, really, is the main thing.
That's so cool, though.
Yeah. So I've been up to that and wishing people I love happy birthday. This is big people I love birthday week, so yeah. Indeed.
Well, I guess we can then get into some announcements.
We've already talked about, well, I have some of our lovely merch,
Yeah.
but we have new merch that will be dropping at the end of this month. And I think we have an image for you.
Yep. Yeah.
So this is for those of you who are watching the live, at least. It's our Which is Which season.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited about it. And you can go to our merch store from the link in the show notes, or if you want to just quick version, it's bit.ly/nerds@church-merch. Just capitalize the first letter of each word. And yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah.
It gives us, some extra money, but also it's good stuff. I still have the clothes that
Yeah.
I've bought. The stickers are really good stickers. All sorts of options. So make sure you check it out.
Yep.
And we've got always have our Pride merch up and lots of
Yep.
spooky seasons. So much great merch.
Yeah. And I will say, that all season long will be kind of encouraging you all to check out our current merch store because this is probably the last season we'll have all this merch available. When we change to a new merch store, we might just kind of rotate through some of those designs and stuff. So really get your merch now. Look at all the diversity of stuff we have up there. And we're looking for a new merch store for a variety of reasons. One, we want to be able to have more merch that is pace size and above. So, which our current merch store we know isn't as great on. So, working on
And
that.
merch that is more like easy to figure out and navigate
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I
it's
not
true.
great. But it
Um,
is cool merch.
yeah,
You can get masks, you can get all sorts of stuff because,
yep,
masks are still important to people.
yeah. As we head into cold and flu
Also
season,
get
and
your
also
vaccinations.
likely heightened. Yeah, exactly.
Vaccinations
I
are
just read
out.
Yeah, I just read something depressing about how like
Oh,
52% or something like that of United States Americans polled said that they were not considering getting the booster this year.
I will get the booster every time they let me get the booster because we should be getting it
Right,
every like 4 months.
right. So don't be like those people. Although
Yeah.
if you're listening to us, I assume that you are agree that about the importance of vaccines.
Yeah. We don't quite represent 52 over 48% of this country, so probably.
Yes. Um,
We got a little room.
also, yeah. Also, our pet costume contest season is spooky season, so that means it's also our favorite time of year to see pets all dressed up and to be abundantly queer. Pets includes plants, includes a pet rock, it includes a stuffed animal. Whatever you
Mhm.
consider a pet, feel free to dress up. And submit it to us. It's really exciting. This is our fourth year doing this. And
Mhm.
surprise, surprise, special guest appearance of the very first winner of our pet costume contest. It's
That's me.
Emily.
I love that I won the first ever one. And on the image that is up, you can see my little basil shop of horrors uh, that
Yeah,
won that very first contest. It's adorable.
along with my
Also,
dog Gandalf.
yes, the rest of our mascot pups don't yet have their Halloween costumes because this is the first year that we've had them. So
Yep,
we are still in process with those. But
it's
um,
true.
yeah, I can't wait to judge the
Yeah,
Halloween costume contest. Um, and you all will get to vote for it, right?
yeah. So
Tell us
yeah,
what it's
exactly.
like.
So how it works. Yep. How it works is you go to bit.ly/HNAC capital P, all of that was capital, HNACP, then lowercase ETS 24, HNAC pets 24, and you can submit a picture of your pet, your rock, your stuffed animal, your plant, and including your name for it and also what the pet is dressed up as. And then Emily, Suzannah, and I will confer in secret and release the scarlet red smoke after however many days. And when that comes out, you will know we have chosen our top five people, our top five favorite, and then we give it all to all of you to vote on. Um, and it will be voted on by October 30th. And then on October 31st, we will announce it on our episode that night who won, and we'll show you a picture of the grand prize. So if you submit, you have a chance of winning the Blu-ray or 4K special edition of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. if you already have that movie, we can talk about a different one. But that's the movie that ties in with our witch season. And then also you get a free shirt or sweatshirt item of merch from our merch store. And you can see two of the designs there. And then one runner up will get some stickers and also an image drawn by Emily. And that runner up will be chosen at random from all entries, even if you don't make it into our top five. So I'm really excited for that. And this is our fourth year doing it, and it's really fun. And Emily only won before they were a co-host. To be clear, we are not submitting our own pets. They do not count. They will just be our mascots and inspiration for you all to submit your cute
Susanna is
animals.
sufficiently disappointed and even perhaps aghast that she is unable to submit our precious Bailey and Athena.
As have I for the past four that for Gandalf and Coco and Yoshi, of course. Um, but
Also, I was trying to find like the pet drawings that I did, but I don't know what Susanna and I did with them after we did them. This is not quite what it will look like, but this is an example of something that it could look a little bit like. And this is Nash, who
aw,
used to be a dog mate of mine. But he
aw,
died this year,
adorable.
so uh does the dog die? I have to take out the background for that. Hang on.
There we go. That's gorgeous.
That's so cute. I love it. Thank
Nashua
you.
Reese is his name. So I got a glimpse of my background, my actual background there for a second. Don't
Yeah,
hold it against me.
I'm not using one this time, which is
I
rare for me.
noticed.
Usually I have a background.
I noticed. Anyway, you should definitely, yeah, you should definitely do fun things and send us pictures of your pets.
Yeah.
I'm also super excited to do the art of a pet.
Yeah,
I'm
I am
excited to
too.
do this with somebody's pet for somebody. So yeah.
That would be awesome.
Mhm.
Um, well, I guess we can get into the movie we're talking about today, which is the oldest movie we have covered on this podcast thus far. The film Häxan by Benjamin Christensen came out in 1922, and it's also known as Witchcraft Through the Ages. That was what it was originally titled when it was released in the United States.
That explains the title. When I was first looking it up, I had trouble finding it.
And Häxan literally means witches. So it's Witchcraft Through the Ages is still kind of a strange title for it. But I mean, it would work as like a subtitle for like an essay, and this kind of is an essay, so I get
Yeah.
it, kind of.
And
Um,
it means witches in Swedish. Just in
yes.
case you didn't know, though it is a silent film, it's also in Swedish.
Depending on which version you watch.
I
But
mean,
yes,
we just had captions that were in English, but
yeah. Um,
writing.
there in the background, I'll talk a little bit about the different versions of the movie. But so the movie, so 1922 is a little bit, Hollywood wasn't industry at this time, film was an industry, but still was not quite the stage I would get towards the end of the 1920s, what is known as the golden age of Hollywood, and then the transition to talkie films and all that.
Mhm.
So the highest grossing silent film of the year was Robin Hood, came out that year. And then, which I haven't seen that particular adaptation, but
Mhm.
this is 5 years before Warner Brothers' The Jazz Singer, which is one of the first films to feature synchronized talking and music, which was kind of paving the way for talkies to be the industry standard. It's 2 years before Nosferatu, which is our previous oldest film we've covered on the pod. And it's 9 years before Dracula, which we covered in season three. And Dracula would kind of create the mold for horror films that followed and also start the Universal Monsters craze. So, when was the first time you have seen this film?
Surprising, exactly no one. The first time I saw this film was last week for this podcast. The second time, however, that I saw this film was 2.5 hours ago.
Yep.
Also for this podcast, to be clear. What about you, Pace?
Uh, let's see. I watched it first a year or two ago. I've known about it for a while, but I only got around to watching it about 1 or 2 years ago. And that was on the recommendation of friend of the podcast, Devin. And Devin's going to be a guest on our In Fabric episode, which will be a horror buff episode. But Devin, they were talking about uh the movie. They had seen it and were recommending it to me. And so I was finally like, yeah, I'll sit around and watch it. And I knew it was silent, and it's hard for me to watch through silent films, just 'cause, especially feature length silent films. And this one is like almost 2 hours long, which is long for a typical
So
feature length film,
long.
right?
Mhm,
But and it's also not a narrative film. Like it doesn't have a plot. It's more of a like essay, visual essay. So like
mhm.
it's it's for me it's a hard film to sit through and watch in one sitting. I have to kind of watch in smaller chunks. But anyway, I watched it and immediately was like, yep, when we do our witchcraft season, we are going to have to cover this film. And it is one of the earliest horror films, not about witches, not the earliest, but one of them. And surprisingly doesn't quite set the stage for the witch movies to follow, but which I'll talk a little bit about in the behind the scenes,
Mm.
because even though this movie came out in 1922, it really did not pick up steam outside of Sweden. So it's a Swedish film by Benjamin Christensen. He cameos as the devil in the film. Uh, there's
I
he
didn't realize
was Yeah, he was for a long time. Excuse me. For a long time he's interested in researching the occult, and he also found a copy of Malleus Maleficarum, which is a 15th century book. I'll talk more about this in our deep dive, but it's also known as Hammer of the Witches by Heinrich Kramer. But anyway, he found a copy of that book and he read through it, and that kind of inspired him to make the film. And
that.
it received some attention, as I was saying, in Sweden, a little bit abroad in Europe, but it was heavily censored by many countries, and including the US, for its depictions of nudity and the devil. And how dare they say that the church was bad? And this film is anti-clerical. It's pearl clutching. So, right. So yeah, it
Not
just
pearl
never
clutching,
gained,
rosary clutching.
right.
I had to.
Um, but like it never got much attention. And I think this is telling that like the witch films to come, and we'll watch like Wizard of Oz. Wizard of Oz had a much greater impact on the witch genre in horror in its depiction of the witch.
Mhm.
So uh it wasn't really until 1968 when Metro Pictures uh released a shortened version of the film in the US under the title Witchcraft Through the Ages, and had a jazz score, and it was narrated by William S. Burroughs, who's the author of Naked Lunch. And that release is what kind of brought it to public awareness. It gained a cult following, and this was the only version known to US audiences for a long time until Criterion released the original film, and they released it in 2001 to an international audience. That's how come we were able to watch it on Max, because Max, the Criterion collection is included in Max. And the Criterion version, as Emily was saying, recreates the original film. This kind of tries, the Criterion versions try to do an urtext kind of, which is a musical term of the movie. which is to get as close to the authentic original as possible. And so that's why it included the original Swedish cards, but then it would have English subtitles underneath to say what the cards were, just as a way of restoring and preserving the history of the movie as it was originally premiered. Um, and that gets to the score for that version. They recorded a new score, and they based the score off of the Copenhagen premiere for which is for the version we watched. The original score is not known, but the Copenhagen premiere uh, was only 3 months after the original premiere. So Criterion thought that was the closest they could get to what an original screening would be. And then the film itself is just in the public domain. It's that old, 1922. But if you want to watch a Criterion restoration, you can find it on DVD, Blu-ray, get it from your library, or look on Hoopla. Or also, if you have access to Max, you can look at it. But if you don't want to watch a Criterion version, you can just find it most places for free online. And it's described as a film essay, which I like that language. So, do you have a one-sentence summary of the film?
I do indeed. A history of sexism and classism. What about you?
Mine is witches get the silent treatment. The film. I mess up my joke. Witches get the silent treatment. The silent film treatment. It wasn't even that good of a joke.
It was great.
But
It was
mine
great.
was longer though, so that
It
means you can take a
was.
shot or don't, whichever. Mine are usually the shorter. Um,
Yeah. So,
yeah,
as we roll through this film, fold our way into it. There's an elephant person. So
there is.
automatically, you got me. But
Yep.
in general, like so it's split into 7 chapters. Though,
Hmm.
like, at least 3 of the chapters are basically one story. Chapters 3, 4, and 5-ish,
Yeah.
right, are all like one story. But chapter 1 is a lot of like cosmology, which was really cool. And I was like, wow, this is almost as good as our Nerds at Church episode on cosmologies from last season. Um,
Yeah.
so I was like, huh. Yeah, so it was really interesting to me because partly because we had recorded an entire episode on it, and so to see like where from our perspective of what we were focusing on from a Nerds at Church perspective, and then how he was like focusing on it from a witch perspective was kind of really cool, just to see where the like theories of creation and
Yeah.
creation myths and stuff aligned and diverged, but like not even that, but like the different ones we focused on. So that was
Yeah.
really cool.
I want to do a quick aside about Luther, but I'm not. Look at me. Not. And about Luther's cosmology. But I am going to say I'm tabling that because I want to do a film that focuses more on cosmology, and then I'll bring it up then. But short version is Luther probably believed in heliocentrism, but there's the historical record is divided on this issue, but I think he did. Because the two places of I've said I'm not gonna talk about it, and here I'm talking about it. I'm not.
Yeah.
Um,
Why would you not talk about it? Like, who's telling you not to talk about it, first off?
well, I mean, fine, I can talk about it then. Emily's goading me into it.
You're gonna mention
Yeah,
it. You might as well
so
mention
true. So in Luther's table talks, there the subject of Galileo comes up, and Copernicus, or one of the two. I think it was Galileo. And the heliocentric model, which is essentially that the sun is in the center of the universe of if the universe, if not just the solar system. And as opposed to the previous theory that the Earth was the center. And Luther in the table talks says he's not about it because it doesn't support scripture. But elsewhere in Luther, he says he supports the sciences and follows what they teach us about creation, including talking about a little bit about heliocentric models. And so it's like looking at which of those did he change his mind? Table Talks was a little bit later in his life, or was it that Table Talks was more heavily edited because it was recordings of people seated around the table as Luther would have these conversations? And was it the hand of the editor who changed Luther's mind about that? And so that's the question. And I'm kind of on Team Luther because in the closest to his original writing, I think Luther is team heliocentric model. So long story short.
I appreciate that because from the perspective of the 21st century, a heliocentric model is not a progressive model. And as we know, history in this country sucks. So it's entirely possible that people were like, wait, when did we switch from Earth-centric to sun-centric to neither-centric? So it's helpful to have that. Also, it's horror nerds at church.
It's true, but we're not into the deep dive yet.
Well,
but still, understood. I will say though, if you haven't watched this, you don't if you I think this is a great film to watch, and I love it. It's gorgeous for a film of this time, and part of what I want to talk about is like the special effects here are just really well done. Also, if you don't feel like watching a 2 hour long, almost 2 hour long silent film, just a quick summary is basically it is, as Emily said, 7 parts, but each primarily it is looking at the first few parts are looking at manuscripts, medieval manuscripts, illuminated. So that's where you get some of the pictures of the person who's an elephant and stuff like that, and descriptions of what these texts about witches say. And you'll get some reenactments of some of the torture devices that the church used against witches, and interrogation techniques. And also you get some reenactments of what witchcraft would look like and worshiping the devil would look like, stuff like that. And then you have a few special effects scenes thrown in, but it's not a narrative at all. It's basically just describing this is what the ancient church used to think of. This is what the about witches. This is what it kind of evolved as time went on. And then this is, I'm not going to spoil the end, that we'll talk about the end a little bit later, but this is what we think today of witches, essentially. So
also we will hopefully, Suzannah, by we I mean Suzannah, will put in the chat the comments, a link to the transcript, because the way the movie plays is they have it caption size for the English, but the cards are frequently more than one caption. And so if you miss the first, you can't just scan really quickly like you could if the cards were in English. So the transcript helps follow along, and it was immensely helpful the second time I watched the movie. So
and you can also just read the transcript if you don't want to watch it.
I put it in our chat so that you could hopefully.
I was confused for a second there. I was like,
where's
this transcript? Where did it go? Okay. All right, I'm following. I'm back on. You would think the person with the coffee would be a little more on it today.
Except that's only your second cup today.
I know, I need 6 more shots as soon as possible. Anyway, continue
right.
gaily forward.
I'm recovering from being sick. We're all there today.
It's true.
Yeah. I will say, I think Emily has more for the roll through than I do. I have so much for the deep dive though, so I'm saving most of my stuff for that. But
That's fair. I'm pretty sure there's one of the scenes in chapter 2. The head of the dead person fell off while they were going up the stairs.
Yes,
I was like,
I love it.
Pretty sure this head just fell off. Yeah. And I did think it was interesting. So in chapter 3, once we get into the whole story of this one particular, the witch hunts, in the Inquisition and stuff, they used lead they cast lead like we would maybe think of people casting bones or runes, which I
Yeah,
thought was interesting. So
I
just
think
like
that's something.
waved the lead over that hot lead over the body and then threw it in water and saw what shape it made.
Yeah, I think you should add that to the witch lore that this film
Yeah. Hey,
introduces.
that's a good idea. So pretend like I didn't say that. Um, Pace, you might know this. Do why, oh why do monks cut their hair like that?
In the tonsure, where it's the bald patch with the ring of hair and then
Yeah.
bald. It's there are theological reasons that came after the practical reason, which is the way most things in the church evolved, especially liturgy. The practical reason being shaving heads to prevent lice. This even nuns had to do when they were novices. They would come in and have to completely shave their head, but then nuns were allowed to regrow their hair, whereas monks were supposed to keep their head shaved, and then the tonsure kind of became a way of growing some hair back and showing that you are of the monastic profession
Hmm.
after it was done more of a practical reason.
Interesting. Good to know. Good to know. Thank you. Thank you, church nerd.
Yep, nerds at church.
Uh-huh. Um, Also, I have seen slow eaters before, but that Weaver started out fast and then was such a slow, like she had time to go all the way to the monks and denounce her and bring them
Yep,
back. And the Weaver's just sitting there eating.
yep.
When she started out, she was eating like, and I was like,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love it.
Um, Also, I love that the devil's grandmother is super important big witch. That's great.
Right.
Um, yeah. Yep, yep. And it ended with slut,
Yep,
which
the
is
Swedish
brilliant
word
in
for
Swedish.
end. Yep. Um,
That's mostly what I
I have
got.
a few things. Yeah, I have a few things. Mostly, there's a lot of anal imagery, as I talked about, especially in the medieval manuscripts. But they're uh, just the medievalists, and we'll talk a little bit later about this when in the deep dive. Just obsessed with asses for some reason.
Right? And kissing the devil's
It's the
ass.
thing. Yeah, but yeah, there's even a scene in here though that was filmed of him going up and kissing the devil's butt. I'm like, I'll kiss the devil's booty if he's cute. Like, hey, Lucifer in the Netflix show Lucifer, for instance. Gorgeous
Mm.
man plays Lucifer in that. Um, I also pimp myself out for money. Like, there's this whole like dream sequence where money first appeared through magic and then disappeared. Um, and it's
Yeah.
like, I'll do anything for money. I'll worship the devil for money.
I will
Doesn't
do a
work like
lot of
that.
things for money, but I will not do anything for money.
True, fair.
That might be
I will
why I'm
worship.
pretty unemployed right now.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I will not do a lot of unethical things for money. Um,
Yeah,
as much as you can in capitalism, which is very hard.
right.
Uh, but yeah. But if witchcraft brought about money, I mean, I'm already a witch, but if like this kind of witchcraft brought about money, I'd do it. Stop motion. I love like the practical effects. So many good practical effects. The
Sure.
stop motion, and then there's like these dancing pigs as there's this witchcraft coven dancing around a circle, and like there are these dancing pigs in there, like standing on their back legs. Fantastic. Just some of the cosmology scenes were just really well done. Like you could tell it was like this film of this tall wall that they built with like rotating spheres and circles and stuff. The mechanics and machinery behind it to make it move like that on screen was just really cool. And just to see like film from 1920s and how far special effects have come, but also in many ways how much this film, like the quality of this film, holds up, even if there is some of the difference of cultural difference of learning how to watch the silent film. But yeah, that's my stuff.
That's good stuff.
Guess we
Although
can
there
get
was
into
one
a
point
deep.
in it
Oh,
that
good.
I like could have sworn it was the KKK and I was really confused, but I missed it the second time through, so I don't know what I was referring to.
Um,
I don't know if you
I don't know. I
okay.
don't remember. I don't recall that particular scene. I
That's
mean, there
fine.
were like Inquisition stuff dressed in white robes, but like
That's probably what
I
it
didn't see
actually
those.
was,
Yeah.
which like not all that different. So,
But I mean, yeah, true. And also, when did that film come out? The silent film about it's this really racist silent film
The
that
Birth of
came
the Nation.
out. Yes, that. When did that come out? Before or after this? Around this, I think maybe
It
a little
was
bit after.
yeah, it was close to
So
that.
I feel like this kind of imagery was also known at least through that film. And so I would not be surprised if
Mm,
a Swedish person is commenting on that intentionally.
that would track. Yeah.
So I guess though we can get into our deep theological discussion of the day.
1915, The Birth of a Nation.
1915. Oh, so before this. So I would not be surprised if Benjamin Christensen was like, I'm going to make the bad guys in this film look like the bad guys, like the good guys of that film, which was an awful, not actual good guys.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway, so diving
anyway,
deep, deeply diving.
yeah, your song. I should give it to Suzannah to play when we transition going forward.
Oh my gosh.
Let's see how much Emily would hate that though. Or we could just do it live every time.
I just discovered the
That'd be even
various
harder.
audio
No, it's
effects.
better if it's recorded. Also, you're
Yeah.
muted, Susanna, so we can't hear you.
Sorry. I just discovered the various audio effects that I can put on here without you really
Ooh.
knowing. So I want to build a soundboard and just react with sounds as you talk. Just be like,
Oh my
woo.
gosh. This is gonna
I
become like a morning show on the radio. I love
yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Except we
that's
record it. It's the after night show. It's the late night show.
I did not know that you were going over the Malus Maleficarum today. And I
Yeah.
am super into it. I have lots of feels about the Malus Maleficarum.
I'm sure you
Ooh.
do.
Yeah.
It is the thing. So yeah, I think that's where we'll start. What do you know about it, Susanna? Like brief summary, since you know about it.
Well, I mean, I went to Valpo, so like because I went to Valpo, I had to take a lot. Like if I wanted to be a feminist and take any kind of gender studies at Valpo, they had to have a theological bent. So there was
Hmm,
a. I remember that
true.
it studied it. I don't remember all my details, but I do remember that like I was deeply affected by the study of it. Like,
Yeah.
and I felt like if there is a past life, like the way I was deeply affected, if the past lives are a thing, I was absolutely burned as a witch, absolutely 100%. The way I
Hmm.
feel about fire when I smell fire, I'll jump out of bed and like even like I'll sometimes hallucinate the smell of fire. It's a whole
Yeah.
yeah, it's a whole thing. But like for me, what I thought was really interesting is that set the scene, right? There's men dead everywhere. Okay, there are a whole bunch that died in the Crusades. There's a whole bunch who died in the Black Plague. There's a significant amount of husbands and sons who were in charge of property and businesses that are now gone. And
Yeah.
there are all of these women that are now in charge of businesses, owning property. Suddenly, women have this like power that they haven't had before. And women, and also they become more obvious. Like so for instance,
Hmm.
the woman who has a whole lot of money because her husband died in the Crusades or whatever, or the old woman who was a healer and had a husband and son, but now it's just her all by herself, right? So they become more obvious. They
Yeah.
become more like single women unattached to men become more obvious figures.
Yeah.
And the things that they do are suddenly with more scrutiny than they would have been if they were
Yeah.
not as like isolated in terms of like their social standing. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
it's not. I think that the Crusades and the Black Death had a lot to do with the witch trials
For
because
sure.
there was so much. There were women in power more, not because they wanted to be per se, but just like suddenly women who were alone and unattached, and
Yeah.
the focus is on them more. And then you add the different kinds of murmurings that lead up to um, the Reformation on top of that, people doing some
Yep,
questioning of
yep,
the
yep.
church. On top of that, you're setting yourself up for
That's
a major backlash against what at the time was probably like their version of feminism. You know, like you had to
yeah,
have a lot of
for
men
sure.
die for a woman to own property. Okay, you had to have like your
Yeah.
cousins die. You had to have like that, like the whole tree had to
Yeah.
be like completely blown out, and that happened a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mhm.
And what's interesting, so thank you. That's fantastic. I love when we can pick your brain from all your women's studies and time being like president of now New Jersey and all this cool stuff. But that's like excellent background for this Malleus Maleficarum, which is this book that was written in 1480, well, written after 1485, came out in 1487 by this dude named Heinrich Kramer, who was an inquisitor for the Catholic Church. And he was mad that the church was not taking witchcraft seriously enough and that his powers as an inquisitor did not allow him to persecute witches because it was witchcraft was not seen as heretical and the Inquisition was to stamp out heresy. And so he was mad about it. So he wrote this book called Malleus Maleficarum um, to prove how heretical witchcraft is and how witchcraft is, in fact, a heresy. And part of it, too, was because in real life, he he would persecute witches anyway. So he went to this town to preach as inquisitor, and this woman named Helena Helena Schuberben came, saw him in the street, and she just like yelled to anybody who's passing by. She's like, "Don't listen to this asshole over here," and just she didn't say like it's recorded a little bit differently than that, but I'm pretty sure that's probably what she said. And or that would be the contemporary version of that. And like everybody in town like listened to her and was like, this guy, his theology is whack. And so like nobody was going out to see this guy. So then Kramer got mad about it and
I love this.
he tried to get her tried as a witch, her and 12 other women, I think it was 12 around there. And they did not. Um, the court decided that they were not witches. And Kramer, as an inquisitor, did not have any power from the church to sentence them. So he's like, I'm going to write this like 400-page book about how evil witches are, all because this woman insulted me on the street. And so he wrote uh, Malleus Maleficarum, and it came out. He was able to convince um, the Pope to give him, just him, special dispensation to try witches, him and one other inquisitor. And so he tried a few, but like the church still did not officially fully support trials of witchcraft. If there were trials of witchcraft, it tended to be more of a state affair
Hmm.
at this time. And when this book came out, uh, most people just wrote it off as this guy is makes no sense. And it was even denounced by the church and said this is not actual this does not represent our theology. And I think they I can't remember the exact word, but like censored him or something. So like he
Ooh.
couldn't, so like his work wasn't allowed to be taken seriously. And almost tried him
Usually they just
for
do that to the
heresy himself.
progressives.
Yeah. And but but the problem is, um, this book, well, this book kind of came back into, so when it came out, it was basically ignored, and the church just thought this is the rantings of someone who we don't have to listen to. But then about 150, 200 years later, when, as Suzannah said, all these things were happening with the Crusades and the Black Black Death, and then the Reformation, and the Reformation. What could a prince do if you are in Germany, in the Holy Roman Empire, and you have two of your electorates about to go at war with each other because one is Catholic and one is Protestant? What can you get them to focus on instead? Let's do a witch
Witches,
hunt. So the
the
Protestants
peasants.
and then the Catholics all came into this kind of, even when the Protestants and the Catholics were not warring with each other, it's because they were hunting witches. And that's basically the entire Reformation until the early modern age, until about the beginnings of the Enlightenment, when that stuff started to slow down. But still, witch hunts have happened throughout history, even in this country, um, and stuff. And but the book itself, I'm going to talk a little bit about the book itself, because Heinrich Kramer, like, in Witchcraft, a very short introduction by Malcolm Gaskill, he describes Kramer as a superstitious psychopath. And I think that's important because Kramer, I don't necessarily believe in like diagnosing people, historical figures, because we can't actually know. But like, I do think it is important to say, like, this man was really obsessive, and in a way that was very like sexually obsessive with what witches would be doing sexually, and in a way that is very much about controlling and imagining and fantasizing about women's bodies. And that's basically what this book is. It is so gross. And while it kind of received during the Reformation and stuff, some, like, it became kind of like a, the printing press made it, what was the word, like, it was something that was popular among, um like, as a popular book that people would read, but it wasn't ever really thought of as a
Fact.
historical or fact type of book. So it never really had that reputation in the early, it certainly influenced views and stuff. I'm not saying it didn't, it absolutely did, but like, it never had the reputation of being this actual book. And then the weird thing about how history works, though, is
Mm.
in the 1970s, during second wave feminism, they this book what became talked about quite a bit in the critiques of the church, and was taken as if it was actual evidence of what the church felt about witches, which it was not, contemporaneously. So now whenever we talk about the book, we are able to contextualize it. But I do think there's a public misconception out there that the book is like a true history of how the church treated women. And that's how this film presents it as well. And it is not actually true. The church did do horrible things to women in witchcraft, and in their witch hunts, not denying that at all. But it should be taken that this, film, and also the book it's based off of, are not historically accurate in many ways. Um,
I was gonna say the Häxan definitely makes it all about sex and particularly
right?
women's sexuality. Like naked women rubbing ointment on each other so they can kiss the
Yep.
devil's butt and milk and
And
axe.
right. And this book also comes up a lot in Mark D. Jordan's book, The Invention of Sodom, because what else was what else was often used as the scapegoat, in the Reformation among Catholics and Protestants, is sodomites. So like, the trials would often go hand in hand. And this book itself talks about how women, by and large, are more susceptible to witchcraft, but the sodomites are also susceptible to witchcraft. So it's linking in a very gender and sexuality way, uh, femme, men, women who are butch, are not quite under the church's authority or masculine authority. And it links gender queer people, and it links gay people, and just kind of the entire LGBTQIA plus umbrella under witch, which is very interesting. And it again comes down especially to gender roles and to sex. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But yeah, that's the legacy of this book. It's gross.
Yeah, that's bad. That's what a bad.
Right?
That's bad. Um, yeah. Well, and I think part of what I think is interesting and is maybe, I don't know. Now I have like particular thoughts about the movie given this information about the book, because chapters 3 through like 4 or 5 of the movie is this story of Inquisition monks and the like persecution of witches that starts from like this couple has a baby and then the guy faints and they do the lead to figure out, and the lead says, oh, there was a witch involved, and then the person on their way out is like, oh yeah, you
Hmm.
might see that witch sooner rather than later. And then a poor woman comes begging for a meal,
Yep.
and the woman's like, well, that better be the witch.
Hmm.
And it snowballs where like it it gets the entire family, because of course the witch is going to be like, you just accused me, I'm going to accuse you back. And like she starts out and she's like, I'm not a witch, I'm not a witch, I'm not a witch, I'm not a witch, I can't confess to what is not true. And eventually they torture her into a confession, which is what actually happens when you torture people. You don't get truth, you get word vomit.
Yeah.
And she then accuses the entire family. And so then this baby's entire family is killed slash condemned to witchery.
Yep.
Ridiculous.
Right.
Ugh. Also, I think it's interesting, and it kind of talks about this, that like, and certainly the weaver who is accused, who is the first accused in
Hmm.
the story of being a witch, um, like a lot of the time when we talk about witchcraft and like persecution of witches and witch trials and all of that, we're talking about it from a particularly gendered perspective, like focusing in on
Hmm.
the gender dynamics. But in the movie, especially, the persecution of poverty and the
Yeah.
persecution of ugly, right? And that even carries on to today, right? Like there are some laws still on the books that are ugly laws, that sometimes have to do with dis like banning disabled people, and sometimes it's
Yeah.
disfigured people, and sometimes it's a combination of that stuff. But like the ways, so we say that it's gender, and we say, and then like pull in also sexuality,
Yeah.
but also, right, this woman who comes is poor, this weaver.
Yep.
Everybody knows her, but she's poor and she's asking for a meal, and
Hmm.
that becomes a an accusation of witchcraft. Um, and then the ugly laws, like the likelihood of someone who has a hunched back or something else. And
Yeah.
even when we depict witches, right, that they have, a crooked nose and a mole and are green. And I mean, that's mostly
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz universe, but all of that also goes into just feeding this narrative that not pretty, not
Yep.
normative, not of a certain class is evil, is witch, is in this
Yeah.
case against the church, which is more of the movie than the reality, maybe. But yeah.
Yeah. And also I want to bring, while race is not directly mentioned in this, it still is there nonetheless. The book kind of predates the evolution of race as a concept, but this still, of course, was colorism and uh, racism and prejudice and all that stuff back
Mhm.
when the book was written. But the way the film depicts it, uh, so the film is trying to show like basically some of the characteristics that the book itself named as, which is what you could help you tell a witch, and it's a lot of what Emily's saying, like a mole, not being pretty or beautiful fitting into, especially like a femme should look like, a woman especially should look like, as standards of
Mm-hmm.
pretty and beauty. Um, and also things that are stereotypical under especially Aryan form of what would be considered Semitic tropes, such as
Yeah.
crooked nose and stuff like that,
As
also
I
are
was
kind of
saying hooked
signs
nose,
of
I was
witches.
remembering as I was saying hooked nose, I was remembering our vampire episode, our vampire season
Yeah,
as well,
we
and
talk a
the
lot
image.
about this and that. Yeah, Nosferatu.
Yep.
So I mean, that's definitely there too, and the ways it's showing like those pictures and in the film and like pointing out the characteristics and how similar that is to a lot of the ways that the characteristics were photos like that were used by the Third Reich in describing who was considered Jewish and stuff like that. Very similar style of those photos is linked in my mind for sure, and in reality. But
Hmm. Indeed, indeed.
um, but yeah, the gender and sexuality especially though come up in this film a lot, and in the book it's kind of based off of too. And to be clear, like the director, we could talk a little bit about the end, but the director is kind of critiquing all of these as he's going on. He's pointing out this is what they used to do, but always kind of from a way that winking at the audience like this, I don't agree with this. And then when we get to the end, there's a little bit more clarity on like him actually saying he doesn't.
Hmm.
But like there's this theme of gender and sexuality, the ways in which the the definition of which, the category of which is a way to help create or reify gender, because you need to have something that is not what a woman is. And so we can create that category and call it a witch. And then women who do not fit into the category of womanhood can fit into this category of witch or crone or all these other tropes. And that includes things like poverty and race and stuff. Uh, in those definitions of what is feminine, what is woman, and stuff like that. And so the witch trials were, in real sense, policing poverty, policing, uh, especially anti-Jewish stuff going on, policing sexuality, the historical witchcraft trials. And especially in this country, when one of the books we'll have to cover, well, it's a play, but is The Crucible in our
Yeah.
retrospective, because I mean, that is about these white Protestants in New England claiming that their black slave is a witch and starting off this whole thing. So the
Ooh.
ways in which race plays into it too,
Hmm.
in the real life witch trials.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
So,
Which, so all of this, right, also connects with the big category of sexism, which
yeah.
I don't think you can ever talk about witch and witches and
Hmm.
witchcraft in any sort of historical context without talking about sexism.
Yep.
And the movie, which now I know is more thinking that the book is more historical than it was, right? But in the movie, it is portrayed that witchcraft was all about women's sexuality, right?
Yep.
That they have to be naked at night, that they rub ointments on each other, um, the like even just like every single bit, right? Even in the movie
Well,
in yeah.
to be clear, I want to say that the book thinks that the, I mean, the movie thinks that the book was accurate of what the church thought about witchcraft at the time, not about
Mm,
what witches were actually doing.
okay. Okay.
To be clear, I realize that I might not have been clear in how I said that. And that's how it's generally treated in the 1970s as well. It's like, oh, this is what the church thought about witches. And it's
Right.
not a
So
representation of the church, it's a representation of this other dude who was an outlier.
yeah. Okay. So does the movie then represent fairly accurately what historically people thought about witches? Like broadly speaking, right? Like is this the like naked
By
requirements
by
at night and the
by the time that this came into, by the time, like in the, it may not have been historically accurate when the film is depicting it was, but by the time this became a popular kind of book that was being passed around in the early days of the printing press, I'm sure there's a lot of kind of folklore and kind of pop understanding of witches that might have been closer to what the book was saying.
Okay.
But it
Oh,
was never like an official thing of the church thinks this is what witches do, which is what I think the film was saying it was.
okay. But the film is depicting what at some point people started thinking,
Yes.
which is it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clear.
Yeah.
Clear as mud, as they say.
Yep.
Right. So all of the like the way that they portray the monks, or the like, there's one point where it's two honorable men amiably try to persuade her to confess. And they are not being amiable. One is being
Hmm.
like outright physically aggressive, and the other is being condescending. And I know that without even hearing a word out of their mouths, right? You
Hmm.
can just see the condescension, you can see the
Yeah.
aggression. Um, but then they also like take some consecrated wax that is the Corpus Christi and wrap it around her neck, and it's just like that the phallic symbols and the candles and the eye.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
there's just, but like there's just so much sexism
Yeah.
in all of like the assumptions, all of that. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's ridiculous. And then like you we think, right? We get that the movie gives it, I thought the movie gave it away. So it was not a surprise ending to me,
Yeah.
right? That this person doesn't, who's making the movie, does not believe these things are true. It does not believe in witches. Um,
Yeah.
but even when recognizing the bullshit of the witch trials and all of that stuff, the diagnosis and how he like explains the strange behaviors and all of that stuff is by and large hysteria.
Yes. Which I think he's also commenting on.
Eh, it feels less
Because
commentary on that and more like this is hysteria. This is, it's
because
like,
the way I read the end of the film very differently, I think.
oh,
And
okay.
and we might both be wrong, or so this is just saying we neither of us are claiming that we have the authoritative interpretation of this. But I'm just saying my interpretation of the ending is that he said when he makes a big deal of saying in the ancient world, this look at these ridiculous things that the church did to persecute poor women, disabled women, and women who don't fit into norms.
Mm-hmm.
We are so better than that. JK, look at the medical industry that's doing the same
Mm,
thing. And that's how I interpret the end of the film of him saying, we just call it a different name, but we're doing the same thing.
okay. I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense with the like klepto. I don't know what they're actually called, but the person who steals the like ring or whatever, um, that tracks. That tracks more. Okay, I get it. I think I get it. Um, yeah, yeah. But it is like, and that is like its own bigger commentary because that is true.
Mhm.
That's what we do today,
Yep.
right? How many people have been diagnosed with anxiety when the actual problem is a physical, like a messed up back, or right, like the jokes of like, oh, you're going to the doctor for an
Yeah,
ankle injury, have you tried losing weight?
exactly. Yep.
That's not going to heal it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Have you tried not being a woman? But not
Hmm.
that way.
Hmm. Yeah.
um yeah.
Oh, because you're a black woman, you can just handle all the pain. You don't we don't have to give you medicine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is such bullshit.
Um, the but that hysteria point, that diagnosis of hysteria, which is a historical diagnosis, now it's most most medical most of the medical world does not think that hysteria is a valid diagnosis, but it used to be a diagnosis to women. Hysteria coming from the
Uterus.
Greek word for uterus, which is why hysterectomy also shares that root word. So basically, the diagnosis of being a woman with feelings is hysteria, or being a woman with feelings that do not fit into what we think women should fit into,
Mm-hmm.
or women who do not listen to the men in their life. Like all these different things could just be diagnosed as hysteria.
Yep.
So, but that kind of brings me to, if the my interpretation of the end is what Benjamin Christensen was going for, but even if it's not, it is a very like proto-Foucault Foucaultian argument about the medical establishment replacing the church as keepers and enforcers of culture. And so, watching the film with a Foucaultian lens, that might have been part of why I read the
No,
ending that way.
it tracks though, because I was not as with it towards the end of the movie, and
Sure.
that's the part that I
Yeah,
didn't
it's a long
finish
movie.
the second time. So
But yeah, Foucault's argument basically about madness, his first work, a lot of queer theory traces origins to Foucault's work, The History of Sexuality, but Lynn Huffer, who I gotta meet, she's so cool. Maybe I'll have her on the podcast one day. But she talks about queer theory should really look at Foucault's work on madness instead as and kind of evaluate that as perhaps a starting point for queer theory, because it's basically what this film is saying at the end, of saying like anything in our modern world, the things that we don't understand, the people who do not fit into our cis heteronormative and racist understandings of what people should be and what masculinity should be and what femininity should be, are put into mental institutions at the time. And this was true even in this country until the Reagan era, when he basically abolished all mental institutions without any way to support the people entering into the world, into the communities, which created a large spike in homelessness, which continues to this day. But all of this stuff kind of just comes from, like, Foucault thinks that it is what the church what used to be a church problem has now turned into, in our civilized minds, we're so civilized now that we call it madness instead of actually like addressing what the people need. And Foucault, of course, cis gay dude in the 50s through 80s and early 90s, like not great on including things like gender awareness in this, but I mean, he talks about gender in many ways, but linking it with sexuality. But like to talk about how this affects women differently than men, he was not great on. And so one of the things then Huffer does is talk specifically about hysteria as kind of a way of this, and then queerness as also a form of madness. And then Foucault reclaims madness, and Foucault saying madness should be a goal, because to be truly mad is to be unknowable and unreadable. And so that's kind of like a goal for him. And so Huffer says that should be a goal for queerness, and queer theory is to become unknowable. And me as a non-binary person, I want to be unperceivable. So totally, my gender is unperceivable. So it totally tracks for me too.
That's what I'm gonna do after this episode. Unperceived. Also, the other thing that accidentally got copy and pasted in the wrong spot, but the devil
Yeah.
christened a witch for witches' Sabbath. Like the churchy
Right.
language of that whole thing. I
Yep.
think that's where I made the connection to the KKK, because so much of the KKK's like rituals and stuff are
Yeah.
intended to be to use particularly baptismal imagery and to really connect it to Christianity, which is where we get
Yeah.
like white supremacist Jesus.
Mhm.
And so this sense of like the devil christening the witch. Like, what does that
Right.
even mean? Right? Like, to
Right.
christen.
But
To
but
christen.
just the language, like, and a lot of this language does come from Malice Maleficarum of like clearly this guy didn't know what he's talking about witches and was writing a fantasy because he's using Christian language for most of what the witches do. Like Sabbath, they have a Sabbath, they get
Right?
christened, they and stuff like that. And they have sacraments and all this stuff. So like all that. So I think that might be a thing from the book. I don't know, but or it
Mm.
could just be him being funny, or he just wouldn't know better. Or it's a translation thing because this is being translated from Swedish. But either way, but no matter what it is, it is very weird. And to me, it's very weird that Christian understandings of what witches do and what Satanists do and devil worshippers do and all these things is always so within the framework of Christianity that it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of like
Like,
it's kind of a little bit like you're telling on yourselves here.
yeah, the imaginative terror is so great that you can't even think beyond your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is a great transition though to witch lore.
Yeah, look at me go.
Yeah. So witches have like here, witches and the
Wait,
devil worship the devil so deeply linked. And I love movie. So I'm really curious. And we'll have to talk about this in our deep dive, but not deep dive. This is our we already did our deep dive. I mean, in our retrospective for the season, we have to
mm,
talk about um what is the source of the witch's powers in each of the different versions we watch? Because in this is
mm,
clearly the devil, but that's not going to be the case in a movie like Wizard of Oz, or well, it might be hinted at, but it's not the case in like Practical Magic and Halloween Town and stuff like that. So, what is the source of witch's power? But here it's the devil. And the devil gives the power specifically so that the witches can do his evil in the world and torment Christian. A lot of it is like witches tormenting Christians just for the fun of it. Seems to be like the goal of what witches
yeah,
do. They have nothing better
right.
to do
Casting
than
spell
just
on
go
their
around
cows
and
and their shoes and
right.
hmm hmm that's what I would use my
So,
superpowers for.
yep. I mean, as a queer person, I do like tormenting cisheads, but
Well, yes, but like I'd rather use it to like feed my family.
exactly, right?
Create
I'd rather be
food
getting that
without
money
having
that
to
we saw.
cook.
Yeah. If all you need to do to get rich is be a witch, then why are all the
You mean like
witches
soup?
poor?
Like it's a soup. It's a can of soup to feed my family. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about, right? The Trump
No.
thing about Trump was talking about
Yes.
with the soup,
Yeah.
throwing the soup, and he was like, and they're just saying it's soup. Like they're actually throwing the cans of soup, but they're saying, oh, it's to feed my family. And now every time I have a can of soup,
Jesus
I'm
Christ.
like,
Yeah.
it's gonna feed my family.
I had an entire can of soup for lunch today. It was chicken noodle because I wasn't feeling well. And that was my lunch.
That's a good
Not a
lunch.
family, it's a pace.
I mean, to be fair, most cans of soup feed
Exactly. That's my
a
point.
person, not a family, unless you're augmenting it
Exactly.
with significant other things. Yeah. Um, yes. Also, witch lore. Devils christen babies. Um,
Yep.
and witches have Sabbath.
Yep.
And you can cast lead to find out if a witch has impacted a person.
And also, witch lore, which I forgot to write down, is witches apparently are obsessed with sex with each other and sex with the devil, and are sometimes described as married to the devil. And witches also can fly brooms using a special ointment that they rub on each other saphically, and then that allows them to fly brooms. Yeah.
Like they never
So,
flew before they flew. Yes.
right,
I'm
right.
just saying, like,
Sometimes it's pixie dust that makes you fly. Sometimes it's rubbing an ointment over your erogenous areas, and then you can
Some
fly.
people need a little more ointment than others. It's
It's,
okay.
yeah, it's all good.
Okay, I'm gonna be quiet now. Sorry, you summoned me with the sapphic comment.
This is a very sapphic podcast. Um, so out of 10 spell books or grimoires, what would you rate this film?
Is it out of grimoires or is it out of Malleus Maleficarums?
Well, the spell book slash grimoire is our one for the season, so you can interpret that. I'm just using that as my particular book I'm using.
That's the only book we talked about.
Well, fair.
Except for maybe the Bible, but that doesn't really count.
Out of 10 Bibles, you can rate out Bibles. I'll rate out Malleus
That's a
Maleficarum.
terrible rating for a witch season.
Right.
How many
Uh,
Bibles? Okay. I need you to go first because I'm having
okay, I'm good. I will rate it 8 out of 10, and I mean that like 10 being good, but because Malleus Maleficarum is the only book we talk about, and if you read it as like this one dude's revenge, trying to get revenge on this one woman who he couldn't persecute through the law 2 years ago, it is kind of actually really funny, except for the tragic consequences that followed. So like out of that kind of like vibe of like this whole work exists because the dude was mad at a woman, like 8 out of 10. This is great.
Mhm.
Love
Mhm.
it, and it holds up so well. And I love the commentary. Like, still, it's 1920s, but like just the awareness to have that kind of commentary as a film goes on.
That's true.
To
That's
the
true.
point that the U.S. was censoring it because it was too anti-Christian for the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I will give this I think this is so hard. I think I have to read it in its context, right? I
Mhm.
can't this is my struggle. Is like I'm trying to think this is the like second maybe ever silent movie I've seen, right? So it's the best silent it's probably the first. It's the best silent movie I've ever seen because I have not seen any.
You see
Um
Nosferatu, and I think that was it.
oh yeah.
That one in
Yeah, so
Nosferatu.
the second. I think I kind of like it better than Nosferatu. Um,
Yeah.
I think I will give it an 8.5.
Nice. I like
Yeah,
it.
I'm gonna give it 8.5
It
Malleus
is.
Maleficarums.
This is so rare. Have a shot whenever Emily rates a movie higher than Pace. It tends to happen sometimes on kids' movies, but especially like a movie that is not necessarily a kids' movie, it's very rare. I love it.
It's true. It's true. It's true. And my favorite kill in this whole movie is actually um Henrik Kramer's pride, which
Ha!
just gets utterly destroyed.
Oh, I love it. My favorite kill though is the head falling off the body as it goes down the stairs. Clearly a production error. I mean, film at this time was super expensive, and like the whole idea of doing like lots and lots of takes was not a thing. So like, whoops, the head fall off. Oh well, we used it. Just love it. This doesn't apply for the hashtag HNAC test. Um,
True.
but did you have any jump scares?
Well, first, reminder the HNAC test, because it's still new. We're still
It
working
is,
on
it
it.
is. Good point.
The HNAC test is the first, it's a two-parter, right? You can pass and you can
Mhm.
pass with flying colors. Um, does your character, so there's a character that does bad and then realizes they fucked up. That's not the
Mhm.
test.
Yeah.
Do
This is part
they
of the plot of the movie.
Yeah. If that is a part of the plot in the movie, then this test applies. Do they stay alive? If they stay alive, they pass.
Yep.
If they stay alive and begin the work of repairing the harm that they did, they pass with flying colors.
Yes.
With a
So in
gateway.
other words, if this movie has your character redemption arc ending in their death, then it fails. Because that is what almost every redemption arc we have found on this podcast involves a character dying before they can actually repair any of the harm they caused.
Yep. And
So
not even,
that's the origin of the test.
and it's not even just like very clearly, explicitly horror films, right? We're
Yeah.
talking Anakin, Darth Vader, Skywalker. We're
Yep.
talking
Kylo
the
Ren.
newest Ghostbusters movie.
Yeah.
What's his face?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it is such a pervasive trope. It is
It
everywhere.
is.
I did not have any jump scares. However, today when I was rewatching with the puppers, they had a jump scare from the music.
Oh,
Because at one point
I
the
love
music
it.
like kind of dies out and then it starts again, and both of them were like, and then settled back in. So
Adorbs.
2 paws of jump scares.
Yep. Yep. Um, well, you picked the next movie, although we both want to cover it. So what's our next movie, Emily?
Our next
That we'll be
movie, and
covering
I
in 2
just
weeks.
realized it's like a very old movie. I don't think I mean, I knew it was old, but I don't think I realized it was that old. Our next movie is The Wizard of Oz, which came out in 1939 and is streaming
Yep.
on Max for those of you who want to watch it in the next 2 weeks, before we go live on whatever day is 2 weeks from now. The 1, 2, 3.
That would be October 1st.
Oh, yeah. So October 1st, we will be covering The Wizard of Oz. If you have thoughts on any of the movies we're going to cover, feel free to send us a voicemail
Yeah.
thingy, voice recording, or let us know, and we are glad to also share those. And if you are on the Facebook Live, if you join us for the Facebook Live on the 1st, then you can definitely engage with us in the comments, because
Yep.
Suzannah is a super techie genius and can coordinate all of those.
Make all that work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also love how our super techie genius Wild Magic has a halo with their background she's using. So cool.
Yep, I love it.
Yeah, and also if you don't have access to Max, many people have this film because it's a popular film, but like you can also get it from your library. Most libraries will have a copy of this film. Always consider checking out your library.
Yes.
They will have VHS, DVDs, Blu-rays, sometimes only DVDs and Blu-rays now. But anyway.
Yeah, libraries are awesome. Always request books from libraries because they're awesome.
They are. They are. Well, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And the episode, like Emily said, will live stream on the 1st and then come out Thursday following that on all the podcast feeds. But that's it for this show, or this episode. Our theme music was by Matt May. Our live episodes release on Tuesday evenings, every other Tuesday, and our audios on your favorite podcast provider on Thursdays. Comment, rate, subscribe to us, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Support us on Patreon and get access to all the cool stuff we were talking about earlier, including movie commentary episodes, BooTube episodes, more bonus content, special recommendations by me, other stuff that we just randomly put up there all the time. But go to patreon.com/horror nerds at church. It's only $5 to sign up, so much cheaper than being wronged by a woman who was in the right to begin with, and then spending 2 years writing a book just to get back at her. And then self-publishing it. Follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Horror Nerds at Church, and Blue Sky and Twitter at HNACPOD for all the latest updates about upcoming films, news, and other announcements. Until next time, I'll kiss the devil's booty for money. I'm okay with it.
I will not.